Welcome everyone back to the Left at Z channel. Today we are watching another Ben Shapiro video about abortion. Yes, I'm very sorry. I did not mean to subject you all to this, but unfortunately we had to, because we need to back up my man Bill Nye. Yes, Bill Nye, the science guy. Bill. Yeah, I quite like Bill Nye. At least what I've seen of him. I think that he's smart and entertaining and is really good at putting complex topics into an understandable format. Like, he's really good at communicating complex things. But unfortunately, today we are hearing Ben Shapiro attempt. Actually, it says Ben Shapiro shreds Bill Nye and other abortion activists. I guess Bill Nye made a video talking about abortion, and Ben supposedly debunked that. I'm going to try to back up Bill here and see how bad Ben did, even though he says that he shreds Bill Nye. But let's take a look.
I have been presented with a challenge by my producers, and as you know, I love a good challenge.
I love a good challenge. She goes into these things so smug and so arrogantly. He really kind of comes off like a bad guy here, like a cartoonish villain. And I don't know if it's intentional or if he just is that way. I'm not sure. Either way,
Today, we're going to be presented with a series of pro-abortion arguments from Bill Nye, the science guy, who's very scientific.
My sex junk.
I'm going to debunk each of them.
Many more hundreds of eggs are fertilized than become humans. Eggs get fertilized, and by that I mean sperm get accepted by ova a lot. But that's not all you need. You have to attach to the uterine wall, the inside of a womb, a woman's womb. But if you're going to hold that as a standard, that is to say, if you're going to say when an egg is fertilized, it's therefore has the same rights as an individual.
Okay, so far I really like Bill Nye's argument. It kind of attacks the life begins at conception idea. And I think kind of just is highlighting that it's more the line between something being alive and someone that has personhood. There's kind of a iffy line if you say that it begins at conception, because, well, not all concepted eggs are I don't know if that's the right word for it, but yeah, you heard his argument. I think that it kind of works to show that it's a lot more of a complex situation than just, oh, if you are fertilized, then now you have a child. You are now with child. Let's keep going.
Then whom are you going to sue? Whom are you going to imprison? Every woman who's had a fertilized egg pass through her?
Okay, stop it right there. Okay, so he's making several arguments in a row.
Okay, Ben Shapiro, if you wanted to take each argument one by one, you should have paused the video like I am doing and discussed each point as it was. I saw it as one point that he kind of elaborated on, but let's see what Ben has to say about it.
Number one, you'll notice that he says that the location of the fertilized ova is what matters, right? That once it's implanted, then presumably it is now on its way to becoming a full human life.
And of course, Ben, the point goes over your head. Just right over it. Whoosh! Somehow Ben thinks that this is Bill Nye advocating for that implantation into the uterus is when life begins, when that's not at all what he said. He was saying that, implantation is the next step and is where actually a fertilized egg is most likely to become a baby, or a baby child. But I think that the broader idea that he was kind of talking about is that it's really iffy on where exactly you draw a line. And no matter where you draw it, there's going to be some weird ways in which that doesn't work.
I've noticed that his standard for abortion is not implantation. There are some politicians who believe implantation is the standard, including, for example, Newt Gingrich. That is not his standard. He has not offered a standard, you'll notice.
There doesn't necessarily need to be a standard for abortion, in my opinion. One of the reasons that I am pro-choice, even before I really understood, the bodily autonomy, necessity of that right, and my thoughts on it was that, especially with medical abortions, we just don't know what the best scenario or what each case is going to look like. And so we shouldn't create laws that could lead to people getting hurt because they don't get a procedure that could save their life.
Also, the notion that a spontaneous bodily abortion, meaning your body does not actually carry through the pregnancy, that this is treated the same way as a purposeful, deliberate abortion is very silly. In no area of criminal law would you treat those two things the same. If you left your car in neutral and it slid down a hill and it hit somebody, that would not be treated the same thing as you taking your car, ramming your foot to the gas while somebody is standing right behind the car. Not the same thing.
My brain hurts after that stretch of an analogy. Like, Ben must be chewing some gum because that analogy was a big stretch. That's the best I got. Either way, it really, I don't see the connection between, I just really don't see the connection in his analogy. I see what he's trying to do, the idea that, one's an accident versus one is a more of a deliberate action, but it just really doesn't work because, if you leave your car in neutral, it's your fault actually because of negligence, but also Ben could be saying that it's negligent that you had sex before marriage because he's a little sexless dweeb, but let's keep moving on from this just bizarre over explanation of the morality of abortion.
As far as who'd be punished, the entire pro-life movement has made the point that it's the abortion doctor who should theoretically be punished in these cases since he's part of essentially an abortion mill.
Nobody likes abortion.
Wait, stop. Okay, so why? Why? Really? It's fine. What's the problem?
Unfortunately, Bill, I don't think that this is going to be a very good argument. I think that when we frame abortion as negative, I think no matter what, like Ben is about ready to do, it's just going to be used back in our face of, okay, it's bad, why do we let it happen? Because I think that the badness of abortion comes from the discomfort about the idea of, something that looks so much like a baby being surgically removed. I talked about this in my last video, but I don't know. It's a morally neutral process, I think. I think that the morality of abortion varies with each situation. And I guess we can have a conversation if there are, abortions that are morally dubious. I'm not even sure what that would necessarily look like, but I just don't get. Let's see how Ben actually responds to this point, though.
He's just said that it's basically the same thing as a naturally occurring thing, and half the time just kind of slides out and whatever. Why? Why does nobody like abortion? Explain.
But you can't tell somebody what to do. I mean, she has rights over this, especially if she doesn't like the guy that got her pregnant.
Okay, stop that right there. What?
I mean, I don't see a problem with that part about, I think that whoever is getting an abortion, they should be the sole person that ultimately decides whether or not it goes through because it is obviously their body that is being affected. Let's see where Ben tries to take this. Again, I'm not quite sure on Bill Nye's kind of reasoning and communication of this point, but I think it looks like the video is actually more of like an interview, so maybe he was not quite ready to answer this one in the best way.
If the guy got her pregnant, and presumably we're not talking about a rape here, but she doesn't like the guy who got her pregnant, so she gets to kill the product?
Hello, this is Editing Kaylee. I wanted to add an extra point here that Ben just called a baby a product. Like, I don't know. I feel like if you want to appeal to pro-lifers, maybe you shouldn't call babies products. But then again, I guess Ben is a capitalist and would be okay with reducing everything to commodity.
And also, yeah, I think that if you don't like the person that you got pregnant with, it's probably best that you don't have a baby together, because it sounds like they're going to, that baby is not going to have loving parents. I think that both Ben and I agree that a baby should have loving parents that can take care of him. And, you know, it is unfortunately pretty clear that babies and children do best with two parents.
How? Why? Is there any logical connect there at all? By the way, there are many people who don't like the father of their children. The children are fully grown. Can I murder the child now?
Well, that is extremely different, Ben. One actually can save a child from going through a very difficult and possibly abusive situation. The other one is lunacy, and Ben somehow thinks that just because you don't want to have a baby with your abusive boyfriend, that's the same as wanting to murder a full-grown child.
We have so many more important things to be dealing with.
Wait, stop. What? I mean, man, this is just, he doesn't even bother to carry through the line of argument. It's just a bunch of emotional appeals. We have so many more important things to be dealing with than what? The killing of 1 million unborn human beings in the womb every year in the United States. That seems like a pretty important thing.
If it was actually that big of a problem, Ben, I feel like we should be making, that even you would be making a bigger deal about it. And you're making a huge fucking deal about it. But still, you're not out there, you know, actually trying to fight for less abortions. If you were, you would be looking at what actually stops abortions from happening. And it's usually easier access to contraceptive and better sexual education. Boom. Done. Why doesn't Ben advocate for that? Because he doesn't actually care about this issue. And it's really annoying for him to play like he does.
We have so many more problems. To squander resources on this argument based on bad science, on just lack of understanding.
No.
It's very frustrating.
Yes, Ben. Okay, let's see. How is he going to say that his pro-life argument is actually the scientific one?
And what bad science have I presented thus far? Any?
You wouldn't know how big a human egg was if it weren't for microscopes.
So the what? Why does the size matter? I'm confused. He's a scientist. This is like him saying, well, you know, does atomic chemistry matter at all? Does molecular biology matter? Like, do those things matter?
Bill Nye is trying to say that it's science that has given us the ability to do abortions and to understand more about, you know, what a fetus development is like, and give greater respect to the nuance of the situation. But Ben just wants to be angry about it for no reason. Your bad science is the fact that you're ignoring the science. You're ignoring the fact that you know, a few week old fetus is really just a bunch of like tissue, and it's really weird that you're calling that equal to an existing human life.
I mean, if you didn't have a microscope, you wouldn't even know they exist. Yeah, but they have consequences, it turns out.
You wouldn't know the process. You wouldn't have that shot, the famous shot or shots where the sperm are bumping up against the egg. You wouldn't have that without science.
Right, and we do. So, and your point is that we'd be better off if we were ignorant like you appear to be?
Bill Nye is making the argument that the scientific position here is that abortion is healthcare and that it is, you know, something that should be available to people. And I think that he is right to say that it is the scientific part, because when we look at the science, well, we know that the development of children and a fetus is much more complicated, and it's weird and hard to pin down when exactly life begins. And outside of the womb, it makes a lot more sense to worry more about the person carrying the fetus rather than the fetus that has no way to communicate what it wants. Not to mention as well that it is clearly a much better health decision to keep abortions safe and legal, because there are many dangers when you criminalize abortions.
You stupid.
Man, the science guy over here. I love this. He's deriding science in order to avoid the consequences of his own arguments. He's like, you wouldn't even know about sperm and egg if it weren't for me, the science guy, and that's why you should ignore what's happening with sperm and egg.
So I just really encourage you to not tell women what to do and not pursue these laws that really are in nobody's best interest.
They're in nobody's best interest except for the unborn child.
The unborn child doesn't have any interests. It's an unborn child. It's a few cells most of the time. If not, it's like a clump of organs that, vaguely looks, actually usually more like a fish up until, later stages. But even then, it's like a gross little, alien monkey thing. Even when it comes out of the womb, babies, they don't necessarily look 100% human. I know that's going to be a hot take, but come on, a newborn, they look a little nasty, and I'm just saying.
Also, I love that he just comes back to his truism. You can't tell women what to do. The entire point is, I'm not telling a woman what to do with her body. I'm telling her what she can't do to somebody else's body.
No, Ben, that's a fundamental misunderstanding that you are apparently having. That other body is her body or their body. You cannot separate the two. We talked about this last time. No, in order to get to that other body, you have to go through that other person's body. And in order for that quote-unquote other body to get out, it has to violently push its way out. So, Ben, it just, I think that he kind of exposed here what the fundamental misunderstanding is that he thinks that there is somehow a body within women that is, and the women just don't exist? I'm so confused.
So one of the first questions people have to think about is, are fetuses persons? Now that's a very important linguistic question, persons. I didn't say human beings, I didn't say alive. Those are three different issues, right?
I like where this is going because it really is a weird semantic argument that people have. And, or at least that's what it kind of ends up being reduced to. So I like this guy so far. Don't make fun of his glasses. They're, I don't know. I'm not sold on the glasses yet, but maybe they'll grow on me.
Something can be alive but not be a person. Your dog is a good example. You might love your dog, it's a wonderful thing, but it's not a person.
Is an unborn
Something
person
can
a
be
dog?
human and potentially not be a person, right? Some people think the early embryo, for example, before 14 days, or stem cells being derived, are members of the human species, but may not be persons. So what do we mean by persons? We mean something that has a
Ben's actually having to do work with his brain, and he can't handle it apparently.
certain set of moral and or legal rights, the most important of which is a right against inviolability. They can't be killed or destroyed or harmed without very good reason.
Okay, so I've noticed an extraordinary amount of circular logic here. Circle detected.
Damn, you got the whole crowd laughing.
Okay, so get this. You ready? A person is a human being with rights. A human being with rights is a person. At no point do you define what makes a human being the human being with rights.
Despite Ben's silly animations, I still don't see what he is saying because that's not what the other dude said. I'd never heard persons are human beings with rights. he was saying that human beings and persons are actually very different. Different in terms of how the concept is used.
At no point does he define when a human being transforms from a human being without rights into a human being with rights. So he just completely avoids the argument.
If Ben Shapiro had any, understanding of how the social sciences works, maybe he would have been able to understand this guy's analogy. But apparently Ben just doesn't have that part of the brain, and that makes a lot of sense. And, guys, I think we need to stop bullying Ben. He clearly has some sort of brain injury where he is unable to understand concepts and things.
Through this magical circle, a person is a human being with rights. A human being with rights is a person. Okay, define human being with rights.
Again, the conservatives wanting a definition when we've given them definitions, but they don't like that it contains nuance and is more flexible than what Ben would want it to be.
And there are a few different kinds of theories you can have. One could be just to say if X is living and a human being, X is a person, right? Now, some people have problems with that. So Peter Singer and some animal rights advocates, for example, think that that's a speciesist attitude, that by saying human equals person, it's problematic that we're excluding animals.
Right. He's wrong. I mean, listen, I will give it to Peter Singer. Peter Singer is a logical thinker. He is consistent. Peter Singer literally believes that you should be able to murder a baby past its birth. He says this. He's not closeted about this. He says that because babies are not sentient and essentially have the same mental function as some kinds of animals, this means you should be able to abort, and when I say abort, I mean murder, a child post-birth.
Okay, I don't know what Ben is referring to here, but this does not make any sense at all. This is, I believe most animal rights activists would say that we should not murder babies because they don't have the same sentience as us, the same intelligence as full-grown adults, that doesn't mean we should kill them. And what most animal rights people will say is that we should extend that to animals that have less intelligence and probably less sentience than us, but that doesn't mean we should kill them, which I'm not totally sold on, but it's a good argument for abortion, really. There is clearly something very different between a fetus and an animal as well.
So I will give Peter Singer perfect points for consistency. But citing Peter Singer as your moral authority is sort of a risky business, as it turns out.
So other people have sometimes what are called a capacity X view, where they say, in order to be a person, you have to have X capacity. And then we have to fill in what X is. Is it the ability to think complex thoughts, the ability to plan and look towards the future, the ability to feel pain, whether you understand it? Is it about continuity of an identity over time, or is it merely being alive and breathing?
In all of these cases, I will remind you that it's not going to be a simple answer. There really is no simple way to draw where life begins. And it's kind of an issue with abortion, but actually it gives us an excellent opportunity about how amazingly simple the act of birth is for the symbol of when life begins, because it works. Obviously, if the baby is birthed stillborn, then, well, we know that's not alive at that point. I don't think we have to argue about that, unfortunately. But if a baby is born and is crying and moving around and squirming, that is now something that exists on its own, independent of any other human. Obviously, it would need other humans in order to survive, but that's because of their lack of abilities, not because of their lack of aliveness, I guess you could say.
Okay, so here's the problem. Any standard other than alive and breathing means that you're going to be murdering people unborn in the womb. Right? Any other standard he mentioned there.
Did Ben just admit that fetuses are not alive?
Any standard other than alive and breathing means the other than alive and breathing means.
like, I'll even admit that's kind of a gray area about whether or not they're alive. They're certainly living tissue within another alive body. But Ben kind of just glossed over that the way that he argued that implies that he thinks that embryos are not alive.
So, discontinuity of identity. We have people who have conditions where they have discontinuity of identity. Can you murder them? Do they have human value? How about thinking complex thoughts? Have you ever met a small child? They don't think complex thoughts. Or a person?
First of all, again, we can see that Ben Shapiro does not like children because he apparently thinks they cannot think complex thoughts, when there are a lot of very intelligent children that can have very complex thoughts and feelings and experiences. And also, I think that the person he was responding to, I don't even know his name, but I think the point he was making is that all of these lines of reasoning to try to divide when life begins and ends are going to be silly and have some sort of contradiction. They're all arbitrary. And this kind of goes back to really the best thing we have in this case is actual birth.
Who is very elderly and maybe losing mental function. Honest to goodness, the standards that he is using here are completely applicable to people who are fully grown.
And again, here we see that Ben just does not have a very scientific way of thinking. Because I think that also the person he was responding to was framing the question similar to how we think about when life begins, in terms of, like, are bacteria alive? They move on their own, but they can't really think for themselves. But we kind of know that they're alive because they move on their own. They make decisions to, avoid danger and go after food. But obviously it gets more complex when you get to, like, abiogenesis and stuff. And, no matter, again, in this case with life as it is generally, like, what organisms are even alive? There's a lot of variations in that too, and it's hard to really say, again, where life begins and ends. It's sometimes a gray area.
Any other standard leads you to some pretty dark roads here.
And then there are complex questions about what happens for things that have the potential to have capacity X, or had capacity X but lost it.
I'm not sure if he's going to make this argument, but I actually am going to jump ahead and see if he makes a similar one. But actually, it's kind of interesting that he brings up, something that loses an ability, how that can diminish its personhood, if you want to say that. But an example could be very, very ill, terminally ill patients who, especially when it's unlikely that they are going to make a recovery. There's a lot of times when, doctor-assisted suicide might be a question, or, something that could be done. And at least I think that it makes sense because that person no longer has the same sentience, sense of awareness, decision-making ability as even a child. Oftentimes they can't even necessarily respond to pain, or pain's the only thing they can respond to. And I think hopefully most people, if not, maybe think about it a little bit. But obviously in those situations, it kind of makes sense to do physician-assisted suicide and let that person no longer live and no longer feel pain, if that's even a possibility for them.
So for example, a fetus doesn't have the ability, as early fetus, let's just say an embryo, just to make it very easy, an embryo before 14 days doesn't have the capacity to think deep thoughts about the future, have future orientation. I think that's pretty well accepted by everyone. But it certainly has the potential to do so, right? And the question is that enough? What kind of theory of potentiality? Hydrogen and oxygen each have the potential together to become water, But does that mean that they are water? They have the metaphysical properties of water?
No,
or do we
that's
require
stupid.
more of a
So actually, it's really funny that you say that, Ben, because yes, the potential for something to become something else is stupid to apply the same qualities of the thing it could become to the thing that it is. That's exactly what he's trying to say. Let's see how he weasels out of saying, yes, it makes sense that there is a difference between the potential for life in life.
kind of potentiality? Something like, in the natural course of things, you will become something.
Well, I mean, obviously the latter. That's like saying that sperm and egg, apart from one another, have the potential to become a human being. Apart from each other, they don't. Combined, they do. I mean, it's the latter, obviously.
That's not necessarily, I mean, like, I get what he's going at, but there's still, like, components of potential life. A fertilized egg, as Bill Nye actually said earlier, is not necessarily, it's not complete either. It needs other parts in order to become more closely resembling a human.
Now, even if you think something is a person, that doesn't necessarily mean you've solved the abortion problem. So it is possible, although popular among philosophers, not so popular in the political press, to say fetuses are persons, and yet abortion is still legal and justified. How does that argument go? The suggestion is that there is a right of another entity that has overcome whatever interest the fetus has. And that is the right typically of the mother who is gestating the fetus. So the claim is, yes, a fetus is a person. Yes, abortion will cause the death of a person, but that doesn't mean that abortion is wrong, because the woman gestating the fetus has a right to stop that gestating, even if it'll result in the death of a person.
That is the ironclad argument that you have to try to get to, is that even if you consider the fetus a person, it still is the person carrying that fetus's right to decide what happens, because there obviously is still a lot of dependency in that relationship, and dependency that goes beyond carrying that baby and delivering it. Oftentimes a dependency to care for it. And even if you want to give it up to adoption, there's still, an emotional attachment that you can have after birth, and a huge physical toll that birth gives or takes.
Now, you can see why that might be popular among certain philosophers, but is wildly unpopular with the American people, because it turns out that that is a horrifying argument.
I mean, maybe if you are pro-life, I guess, but I don't know. I don't think that it's that crazy to really say that someone carrying a fetus, even if that fetus is a person, it's okay, for them to kill them. If, I don't know how well this analogy is going to play out, but hear me out. If one person was attached to another person, there's some sort of freak accident where they got merged together, and one person was clearly, because of the accident, unable to communicate what it wanted in the situation. It did not know how to, it's unable to communicate its needs, its wants, its desires, and how it thinks this situation could play out. So if you went to the doctor and it turned out the best situation was to remove one body from the situation, but that would kill them, but keep the other one intact, then I would say that's probably justified to kill the person that is, unable to really determine or explain its interests, especially if we don't know whether or not they will be able to after.
That is, again, broadly applicable to situations beyond fetushood. When do my rights conquer your ability to live?
I mean, there's a very, very simple example of how someone, we'll just say Ben's rights, would override my ability to live. If I went up to Ben and I said, I'm going to cut your arm. I had a knife, I had his arm, I was going to do it. Someone could shoot me and kill me, and that would be acceptable. I was only going to cut his arm, but I was still posing a bodily threat to Ben, and so my life was, because of the position that I put myself in, I gave up some of my rights to live because I have now threatened this person. Like, it's a very simple, and like that's a very simple understanding, but apparently Ben doesn't get that. I don't know. My brain is starting to really hurt from all this mental gymnastics.
I mean, throughout human history, by the way, there have been multiple societies where the dehumanization of other people has allowed people to argue for their mass murder.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
I hate you. Ben, you're not allowed to use this. You're not allowed to. I'm sorry. No, we claim this. Obviously, King Farquaad is a capitalist loser, and he's more similar to you. He's even got the height, you know? Second of all, Ben, you are literally saying some of you may die, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. Because people who can get pregnant are dying because they can't get abortions. Like, I'm sorry that you have these weird feelings about it, and for some reason you want to control women, but, like, literally, you are the one that are sacrificing other people for your own gains, for your own feelings.
I'm not just talking about the Holocaust. I'm talking about throughout human history. That chain of thought, that this is a person with a right to life, and my countervailing rights overcome that right to life, that is an argument with an extraordinarily ugly history.
And it's so disrespectful to compare abortion to the Holocaust. Like, come on, dude. Abortion has been around for years and years and years and years and years and will be around probably forever. And people have been doing them for millions of years and haven't stopped. Versus genocides, well, unfortunately, we do a lot of that, but we don't do that most of the time. Whereas societies all across the world have conducted abortions in some sort of capacity for a very, very long time.
You know, the fact that that last argument is so ugly is why they spend so much time trying to say that this is not a person. Because if they admit that this is a person and that the person has rights, that a human being with potential is in fact a human being, then all the other arguments fall away pretty quickly. And they know this, which is why they never resort to this final argument. Again, the clearer they are in their arguments, the uglier the argument is.
The clearer we are in our arguments, the more uncomfortable Ben is because it's a stronger argument. All right, that looks like it's the end of it. That was a tough one. I did not enjoy that one. It was just like bouncing all over the place and didn't really make sense. And it was hard to gather my thoughts because Ben just like, none of his points make any sense. And trying to make yourself understand them it's literally torture. I have self-harmed myself. Someone please call a hotline because I don't know why I keep doing this. Don't worry, I am okay. But that was a tough one to get through. I think that Ben just like, I don't know. I think he's ironically the one that's out of arguments because what arguments did he make here? That babies are alive, and if you say that babies aren't alive, then you're a baby murderer if you like abortion. And I don't know. He just always tries to reduce an argument down to, you know, a silly level that just no longer makes sense and no longer has the same context. But this time he just like didn't do the reduction, and so it was just random arguments with absolutely no like context at all. I don't know. It was wild. I'm sure there's some, you know, weirdos out there that thought that, yeah, Ben, he got him good. He shredded those arguments, but honestly, I just don't think that he fairly and honestly engaged with any of them at all. I tried to kind of engage with Ben's arguments, but it's so hard when, you know, I just don't get the way that he thinks. Like, it just literally is like he doesn't understand what the person he's trying to engage with is saying. So anyway, it's a much more, I think that we have a kind of similar conclusion to the last video that, I don't know, abortion's a very complex issue and ethical discussion issue, and I don't know, it's kind of, it is really messy to try to get into, and even like he kind of was saying that the argument that you say someone has full personhood, even if it's a fetus, and it's okay still to abort them, that's definitely a tough argument to handle. And so, I don't know, I can see why Ben tried to shrug it off as just nothing. But in reality, that actually is a very deep and a question that, at least for me, will maybe keep me up a little bit. But instead, the conservatives, they don't want to have a conversation about it. And even if they did, the policy part of it, I feel like, is just pretty clear that, like, as a policy, it's generally much better, and you have much better outcomes when you make abortion safe and accessible. But, you know, anyway, thank you all very much for watching this video. Again, if you didn't watch the last video, go back and watch it. And check out the rest of my channel if you'd like. If you like this video, be sure to hit the like button. If you like my content, be sure to subscribe. Again, thank you all for watching, and I will be seeing you in the next video. Let me know if you have any suggestions for what we should talk about, what I should react to. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Have a good night, all.